It's the Farmer to Farmer podcast, episode 122, and this is your host, Chris Blanchard. Danny Percich raises vegetables at Full Plate Farm in Ridgefield, Washington for a 90-member winter-only CSA. With 3 acres of mostly outdoors production, Danny has decided to focus on an underserved niche in the marketplace, enabling him to make a living on a small acreage. We get muddy discussing the challenges of winter production in a climate where it rains literally all winter. Danny gives us the lowdown on how they manage deer predation and vole populations, as well as how he dresses to stay warm and dry no matter the weather. Danny also provides insights into how he has minimized capital and labor inputs on his farm and how that influences his farming schedule as well as his cropping and production strategies. I really got a lot out of this, and I don't think it's just because I'm from the Pacific Northwest. It was a lot of fun to talk to Danny and kind of hear he's got an interesting approach to this whole farming thing, and it was enlightening. I hope you enjoy this show as much as I did producing it. The Farmer to Farmer podcast is generously supported by Farmers Web, software for your farm. Farmers Web makes it easier to work with your buyers, saving time, reducing errors, and increasing your capacity to work with more buyers overall. FarmersWeb.com. And by BCS America. BCS two-wheel tractors are versatile, maneuverable in tight spaces, lightweight for less compaction, and easy to maintain and repair on the farm. Gear-driven and built to last for decades of dependable service, I wouldn't use anything else. BCSAmerica.com. And the Farmer to Farmer podcast is made possible with the generous support of Vermont Compost Company, founded by organic crop growing professionals committed to meeting the need for high quality compost and compost-based living soil mixes for certified organic plant production. These guys are the best. VermontCompost.com. Danny Percich, welcome to the Farmer to Farmer podcast.
Well, thanks, Chris. I'm happy to be here.
So glad you could make this work on a almost June day.
Yeah, almost. You know, we finally have some nice weather here in the Northwest for the last few weeks. It's been quite a wet spring, so we've been racing around trying to get things in the ground.
Danny, tell me about that and about your farm, their Full Plate Farm in Ridgefield, Washington. Where's Ridgefield? How many acres are you farming? And how are you guys selling your produce?
Ridgefield is roughly about 15, 20 miles just north of Portland, Oregon. And we're on a 10-acre piece of property. 5 acres are forest and 5 acres is our field. About 3 of those acres are what we're growing vegetables on. We have a 90-member CSA, and we just do a winter-only CSA. And if we have extra produce, sometimes we'll sell a little bit wholesale to some restaurants, but mostly everything we grow is just strictly for our CSA. It's just me, and I'll hire an employee a couple days a week, kind of in the midst of the summer and a couple days in the winter to help with some harvest. Yeah, that's the gist of it.
So, Danny, I'm just going to ask right off the bat, with 3 acres of produce and a 90-member CSA, are you making a living doing this?
We are, yes. I'm not working quite full-time. I'm helping take care of the kids a day a week and also going on family vacations and things like that. But yes, I'm making a living doing it. It's great. It's just me. My wife wouldn't choose to farm, I don't think. She's an artist and an educator, so she's happy doing what she's doing, and I'm happy doing what I'm doing. And we're making it work.
And is your primary market in Portland, Oregon, or are you selling on the north side of the river as well?
We are. Yeah, we are selling on both sides. So we are selling here in Ridgefield. People come to the farm to pick up produce here, and then we have a pickup site in Vancouver and 5 pickup sites around the Portland area. So everything's within, 30 miles is probably the furthest that we go, and that's even my mom watches our kids a couple days a week, and she takes produce back to her house for people to pick up over on the west side of Portland.
And you said that you're doing a winter-only CSA program.
Yes, winter only. So, our season, our harvest season, our delivery season, pickup season goes from usually right around the 1st of November to about the last day of March. So it spans, we have 11 pickups over that time. It's an every other week harvest and pickup schedule for our members and ourselves. So it's 1 week on of harvesting and then a week off to do odds and ends.
And you said that you're planting now.
We are, yes. So we don't have the mad rush to get in the spring, and that's part of the reason why we chose the winter model is because our fields here on our property are pretty wet in the spring. We have a pretty great soil, about 12 to 18 inches down, about 18, sometimes 2 feet in some areas, and then it's pretty much like a lot of clay. So our water level can get really high, especially in some, in the spring and fall and the winter. But in the spring, it's really hard to get in. So we were planning on doing a summer CSA, and then just couldn't really get in. I was like, well, we'll do winter again. So we're planting right now. We have our winter squash in. Just finished getting our leeks in. Got our onions in the other week. Kind of the later side of things this year because it's just been such a wet spring. Then kind of in the next few months, I'd say probably about 85% of our fields, or 90, are all planted by the end of July. And then there's, kinds of odds and ends of some fall and winter greens, kind of quick-growing greens. They'll kind of just hold over the winter that we're planting. Our last planting is probably in September first week of September for those. And a few things, some turnips and rutabagas and things in August. But most, the majority of all the brassicas are planted right around mid-July. Our carrots around mid-July, and then in kind of late June, our parsnips and parsley root and other things like that.
So now I'm familiar with the climate out there because I grew up in Seattle and actually lived for a couple of years in Astoria, Oregon, which would be off to the west of you there. But for the rest of our listeners, tell me about the climate in southwest Washington State.
Well, it's, we have basically from right after 4th of July till probably mid-September, there's no rain at all. It's really rare to get some rain. So we have a drought kind of for those months. And then from the rest of the time, it's, rainy on and off. But then especially from November kind of into March, it's just kind of, slow, drizzly rain, not huge downpours, but just kind of, wet. It's pretty moist and wet, during that time with, some very nice sunny days and breaks here and there. It also wouldn't really be that fun. You got to have some sun. The sun has to come out every once in a while. It's kind of the gist of it. Is that?
Yeah. And how cold does it get there in the wintertime?
Oh, so usually, around into the teens and 20s is kind of the low most of the time. This last year we were down where we were right around 10 degrees for a couple days, a couple nights, and then back in 2013 we're about the same. And those have been extremes in our area. Usually, they're definitely records that we've been setting kind of the last 5 years. We've had a couple winters that have definitely set some records and definitely pushed us to kind of hone our techniques. Back in 2013, I was talking about, we had, it was down, for about a week or so, we were really down in that, the tens, people in the valley were down to zero. And so we definitely learned a lot that year. That year was a learning year of what we were growing and varieties were growing that were working and some that weren't. So this last year, I felt like we actually handled everything really well, even though we had some really extreme winter weather.
Now, when it gets down into the tens at night, what's happening the following day? Is it getting back up above freezing, or does it stay cold for days or weeks at a time?
Usually not, but it's rare to get back above freezing if it's down that cold. So we're really looking at the weather. We can look at kind of a long-range forecast, and if I see that there's something like that coming our way, then we'll harvest what we need to harvest to make sure that the CSA, the schedule, stays on time. Because I found that going off schedule, our harvest schedule and delivery schedule can really mess things up, because if you go off once and you're trying to make up, but then the weather gets crazy again, it's just kind of a big old mess trying to mess around. So we've really just tried to stay on our schedule of our delivery schedule. So if we see that coming, then let's go dig roots now and get those out, and let's go harvest these greens and put them in the walk-in. And it worked out this last year. I was pleasantly surprised that we had some mad rushes, and I had to do a little more, harvest things a little earlier than I'd like to harvest them, because we really like to harvest things a day or two before we deliver them, sometimes same day too. in the winter. So we just kind of we really watch the weather in the winter, I guess. That's kind of our big thing. We were pulling snow off, pulling snow off the roots and digging roots, digging parsnips and things, trying to find the lines and the rows. So it's always an adventure, when the plants are covered with snow and you're just trying to search around for them and trying to make sure you're digging in straight lines and not diving into the middle of the bed, staying on the outside of the bed, and it gets a little messy. You could say that when the weather gets a little unpredictable.
So it's really interesting to me that you're talking about digging roots for your CSA, which runs from November through March. Now, here in the upper Midwest, where I have most of my farming experience, we, of course, would harvest those roots and put them into a root cellar or a walk-in cooler over the winter. It doesn't sound like you're doing that.
No, we're not doing that. There's such amazing flavor that you can get in the winter with the roots when you're pulling them out of the ground and letting them freeze and thaw, and the starches kind of turn to sugar, and you really get this sweetness that you don't get the same way that I found when you do put them in the walk-in and store them. So our carrots, I've had people tell me that I've ruined them about carrots for the rest of their lives, so they can't, they won't look at carrots the same way again. You just get this incredible flavor, It's like, parsnips, same thing, carrots, the beets. So when you're harvesting these roots, throughout the winter, you get a whole nother, complexity of flavors, and people really appreciate that. But with that said, we've also, over the last couple winters, we definitely had some, with carrots specifically, had bigger losses in, January and February of those. So right now, I think this year, we're planning on probably putting up about a third to half of our carrots into our walk-in and storing those for the second half of our season, and then digging stuff fresh probably up to about January or so. Because I figure, it's better. Do people want to have carrots that don't taste as good or not have any carrots at all, in March? I figured carrots, people still want to have carrots.
When you're talking about putting up enough carrots for a 90-member CSA or putting up half of the carrots for a 90-member CSA,
yeah.
How many carrots are we talking?
Oh, let's see. So in our full share, we try to give around 2.5 to 3 pounds every 2 weeks. So that's about 300 pounds. So about 1,500 pounds of carrots, I guess, would be about half.
Okay.
To do that math, yeah.
A not insignificant amount of carrots.
No, definitely not insignificant. A fair, yeah. It's we're definitely going to have to get another a cooler probably to accommodate doing that. So that's kind of right where we're at. And we've for our cooler we have the back of a refrigerated truck. You can just buy the box of those already insulated, and you can find them on Craigslist. And we found that's what we have right now. And the great thing about that I really like is that it's already waterproof, weather tight. You don't have to build. It doesn't have to go inside a certain area. You can have it out. Right now it's just under our trees of our forest, kind of back in there. And this module, you can move it around pretty easily too. So it's rather than the panels, you have to put all the panels together, and you can add insulation. So we'll probably get another one of those just for some root storage.
And are you running the refrigeration unit that came on that box, or have you installed a regular refrigeration unit inside of the box?
We installed a CoolBot on the one that we have right now. That's just I think it's a 8x12 unit, and you can get them in all different sizes. So the CoolBot works great, and also with using the CoolBot in the wintertime, we're not having to we're not swinging the temperature from 90 outside down to 36 or 40 or There's not as much of we don't have to drop the temperature as much. So I feel like, I haven't done the math or the specs on this, but that we could get a larger box and still cool it without running into issues of size with the CoolBot. Does that make sense?
That totally makes sense. Because when you're harvesting roots at the end of October or bringing in greens in February to store in there,
yeah,
those things are going to be 30 degrees, 40 degrees as far as core temperature, not 60 or 70 degrees in a core temperature that you're trying to pull out of it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, the temperature, most of the time the temperature is probably at night is in the 30s, and in the day is probably in the high 40s, low 50s sometimes, but it's kind of between, mid 30s and mid 40s is kind of the average temperature of the Northwest most of the time. So we're only really dropping things, 10 degrees, 15 degrees sometimes. So it's not, not as big of a swing there.
What other infrastructure do you have for winter farming? You mentioned the walk-in cooler, the truck box, and plans to get another one. Do you have a packing shed that, in addition?
Yes, we have a packing shed. It's a 20 by 24 foot carport with some wash tables, some packing benches in the middle. We have a root washer there, and then just some other shelving. And we have a tractor shed next to that. That's a larger shed for our 73 International and our 49 Alice Chalmers G. And then just other tools also. My wife's parents live on the same property. They live back in the forested part of the property. And I'm able to store winter squash up in their garage. And then also Russ, who's my father-in-law, he owns and runs a transmission shop. So he has a lot of tools that I'm able to use or borrow or ask for help if I need some help with some fabrication or anything. If I break something and I can't fix it, he can just about fix anything. So it's pretty amazing to have his help, and he loves helping too.
That's an awesome resource to have.
It's an amazing resource. No, I can, if I blow up an engine, he can help me rebuild it. So it's pretty great. And with him being a small business owner, he's always encouraged me to kind of build slowly and don't go in debt too much, and just kind of use the resources available and what's around. And that's kind of what we've been trying to do here.
So tell me about that. You've been farming since, I think, 2010 on Michelle's family land.
Yeah.
And are you still growing your farm, or are you kind of where you intend to settle out?
I would like to grow it some more, but but we need to expand and rent some more land nearby. So we're pretty much at capacity of where we want to be with the land here. And I've always said when all the kids are in school, then we'll probably may take another step in another direction, or at least assess it at that point. We have a 5.5-year-old and 2.5-year-old twins right now, so things are pretty just busy around the house. So once everybody's in school and there's a little more time on the ends of days and the sides of the days, we'll think about. I'd like to think about renting some more land, and because there's definitely there's a market for winter vegetables. It seems like there's more and more people doing it in the area. There's a few good winter markets in the Portland area, and there's a handful of people that have winter CSAs, but there's still a growing need for local food during the winter.
So you haven't had any trouble selling what you're producing?
No, there's always like a little push just at the end sometimes, like the last couple weeks. They're like, oh, we still have a few, CSA spots, and we'll send out a little email blast or just tell a couple friends, and they'll post stuff on their Facebooks and things. And and then but not really. I guess to answer your question, no.
Last week we were talking to the Cunninghams. They're down in Humboldt County, and they farm with oxen. And I asked them, why take something like market farming and make it harder? I mean, it's hard enough already. So why crazy winter farming?
Well, it's a good question. I love the hardiness of winter vegetables, but there's some benefits of it too. The toughest thing is definitely the quality and potential loss of vegetables is definitely there, dealing with that side of things. But we can also charge more, which is kind of makes up for a lot of that. But also one great thing is we have less weed pressure in general when we're planting, because if we're we don't have the slow spring kind of slog of, the slow-growing weeds, the chickweed getting in everything and all that. We just have more of the annual kind of quick-growing weeds that we can take care of. When we're planting stuff in mid-July, there's just not the same weed pressure, so that's a nice benefit. But one of the biggest reasons we've chosen to do the farm in the wintertime is it really has evened out the schedule for us. So in the summer, we're planting, watering, and weeding. In the winter, we're harvesting, washing, packing, and delivering. So instead of doing all that just in the summer, we can divide that over the whole year. And it's been really important to me to have, because I've worked on different CSAs and done lots of regular season farm work, and it's crazy in the summer, and it's great. I love it, and I thrive on that, and I love long days. But once we had a family, I've really come to appreciate having time for them, and I start work at 8 and I end around 4, and then we take vacations and go on school trip. Go on kind of follow the school schedule, do like stuff during spring break and winter break, and take off during the summer. So there's a lot of flexibility as long as they have somebody to help be around to just make sure the irrigation's going when I'm gone. Then I can take off in the summer, and it's amazing. It's so great. It's so great to be able to play with the kids and be with the kids and, just kind of have some sanity during the summer and being able to, because when you're in the midst of, regular season farm, it's, you're working long, hard days and you're bone tired at the end of the day most of the time, or pretty close to in the middle of the summer. And there's lots of more logistics to try to work out with, harvesting, packing, delivering, and all that, and marketing. And so we kind of it distributes everything over the whole year. It's kind of instead of having so much downtime in the winter, we have plenty of work to do in the winter. So I really like that about it a lot.
So when you started in 2010, was the winter CSA your business plan, or was this something that developed more organically?
It developed a little more organically. So when Josh Volk started Slow Hand Farm that first year, I was talking to him, and I was back east, and I was coming back, and I ended up working with him that year on that. And we'd always talk, and he'd always talk about, it'd be cool to grow just for the winter, and kind of always stuck in my head. And so the first year we moved out here, we moved out and bought a mobile home and put on the land out here, Stell's family's land, but we wanted to remodel it, so I knew I'd be doing that summer, and I was also managing a farm in Portland at the time too, so there wasn't time to necessarily grow and market and sell in the summer. And I was like, well, I can grow the food in the summertime and sell it in the winter. And I was really inspired by all the chicories we were growing at Slow Hand Farm, and so we did that winter, and it worked, and it was good. And we just started with 12 members. We kind of doubled every year for the first 4 years, and kind of settled here around 90 members. But then the next spring, I was planning on doing a regular season CSA, and it was just so wet. I just really couldn't get in early enough like I wanted to, and I was like, why don't we just do this again? And I was still, at that time, I was still managing a farm in Portland. Those first couple of years of the farm, I was doing that while we were settling in up here and getting things going. And then the next year, started just being here full time, or fullish time, you could say. And and then we just haven't really looked back. There's the market, people love it. I've really just forced chicories down everybody's throats, and tell them that's what they get to eat. A lot of the time, everybody, that's one of the learning curves of the winter CSA. But it's been good.
So you talk about having to force people into chicories. That happens to be just about my favorite vegetable.
Mine too.
And really hard to get here in the upper Midwest in the wintertime, to get anything other than just radicchio and the occasional esterol. So are most of your customers coming to you from other CSAs, or are they doing your CSA in the wintertime and then something else for their food supply from April through October?
It's a good question. It's kind of a mix. I definitely find that I am able to kind of hit the market kind of in between things. So there's some people who love going to the farmer's market and love during the summertime and walking around and doing that in the summer like as an activity. So those people don't have like a CSA in the summer, so they're like, oh, but they still want to eat locally, but maybe not want to go to the farmer's market in the winter. There's some people that love having home gardens and growing a lot of their own food in the summer as well, and so aren't interested in the CSA. Or some people that travel in the summer and can't be around to actually get a regular season CSA. And then there are some people also that will do a CSA and then come over our way and sometimes have a little overlap where they're up to their ears in just about everything in the fall. But so it's been worked out really good. And it's definitely a way that I've marketed our CSA when I tell people about it, is that there's a little more flexibility with the winter CSA. The crops, the vegetables store longer in people's refrigerators. They don't have to pick up vegetables every week, so it's every other week. So they're not, for their convenience sake, I guess. They're not having to go every week necessarily to pick up veggies. So we kind of can get lots of different people. There's lots of different people that are interested in it.
In terms of volume, how big is your typical share?
Oh, it's probably like a full-size share is probably, when we pack shares and deliver those, we do them in 14-gallon Rubbermaid tubs. And that's usually around like 18 to 28 pounds, kind of depending on the share. So there's some variability, but depending on what squash might be in the box or if it's a root-heavy share. We like to have about around 10 to 13 different vegetables in each share. And then the half-size share is just pretty much halved, basically, almost exactly, with an occasional, maybe not a half a head of cabbage, maybe a smaller. We're able to use the small heads of cabbage, to put in the half-size shares. So it's been a nice way to use some of the smaller produce, too, to put in for our half-size shares.
Now, with something like the winter crops, it's such a different mix of product, I think, than what most people are probably eating all summer long or all winter long if they're not part of a CSA. I mean, you're giving folks things like, salsify and rutabagas and celery root and root parsley, in addition to those, the endives and the escaroles. And in most CSAs, there's already a challenge in getting people to eat their produce, right? I mean, to actually use everything that's in the box. Have you found that that's more so with your winter CSA, or do the people that sign up come in expecting a little bit more adventure?
I think some people don't know what to expect necessarily, and some people are. It's kind of a mix, I guess. But it definitely is. It's been honed over the last few years. I feel like we've gotten better at or learned what people really don't like turnips. I mean, some people really love them, but most people only want them, maybe a couple times during the winter. They don't want to have turnips, don't want to eat turnips with every share. So it's definitely been, things like that. And say, parsley root, some people really like and find it novel, maybe in its own way. And so we plan on giving that out like once, maybe twice. And same with salsify. So there's some things that we plan on just giving out one time during the season, and rather than overwhelming people. So I feel like we've definitely, over the last few years, kind of, we'll do a survey at the end of the year and kind of, not everybody obviously responds to the survey, but the people that do, we get a little feedback, and just from talking to people too, finding out what they like and what they don't like. And a lot of our members are friends or, friends of friends, and so we get some good feedback that way of what people have trouble with, what people want to eat. But it is, there's a whole other side of cooking for, winter crops. And chicories is probably one of our more difficult ones, but once people figure it out, and there's people that never really liked it, and, would send me that they get too much of it, but then they hit a point, and they're like, oh, I've learned how to use this. And that always makes my day when people start getting excited about chicories, because it's such a wonderful, wonderful plant to eat and grow.
So what do people figure out to do with chicories? I mean, I know all of the things that I like to do with them, but that doesn't necessarily match up with the rest of the population?
I think a lot of people like to pair, there's the, one thing some people do is they'll cut a little bit of bitterness out of it by soaking the chicories in ice water for about 15 minutes, and then drying them off, and then eating them that way. But a lot of people have found that they like to pair a sweeter, maybe dressing, or like some, you could say like pomegranates or like oranges or some sweeter fruit type dressing kind of mixed in there with the bitterness, and just try to contrast that. There's some people who've really found that they love chopping it up and throwing it in like their scrambled eggs, or sugarloafs are one of our favorite chicories to grow, and they have this amazing, they're one of the more sweeter chicories, but people really like cutting those in half long ways, drizzling some olive oil, and sprinkling some salt, and roasting those in the oven at like 400 degrees or 450 for about 15 minutes, and then you get like the crispy leaves, the little tender sweetness inside, and it's kind of lots of different textures and flavors happening at the same time. And those are kind of I guess probably the three more popular ways that I've found that people really have learned to enjoy eating the chicories.
Since you're harvesting your crops from outdoors during the winter, are you growing anything actually undercover in a hoop house?
When we started out, I didn't want to have to rely on row cover or tons of plastic to cover everything and grow everything. I wanted to, select different varieties that grow well here in the Northwest that can handle the weather, and not to have to necessarily rely on everything being in a hoop house. So that's kind of the way that we've worked. But we have one, our greenhouse that serves as a greenhouse in the summer, and in the fall we'll take out most of our benches and our ground cloth and then open that up and plant in there. And then we have a 70 by 30 high tunnel that we'll plant into also. We usually plant spinach and cilantro. Sometimes we'll put some parsley in there, and then lots of different, brassica greens. In that high tunnel in the summer, we've grown sweet potatoes in the summer as a crop that we'll hand out in the winter. But we've been, we're pretty lucky here in the Northwest, and I guess in our country. There's some really great seed companies here that grow a lot of seeds and plants that really work well in the wintertime, with wild garden seed just down in the valley, and adaptive seeds and uprising seeds and fescue seeds, and those are all kind of here in the Northwest, and they've all selected things kind of specifically for this area. I mean, obviously you can grow them anywhere, but there's some really interesting variety of greens and herbs to buy from them to grow out here in the Northwest.
And those four companies that you mentioned, are those the places that you're getting most of your seeds from, or are you getting normal stuff from other companies as well?
If I can get anything from those guys, whatever they have, those are kind of the places that I look to first, and then kind of fill in the gaps from everybody else, like from Johnny's and Osborne and Territorial, and those seed companies kind of fill in the gaps. Or maybe there's a specialized seed or a hybrid that I'm looking for that outperforms or does meets my needs in other ways. But I'd say those kind of four companies are kind of the majority of where I like to get most of my seeds.
With something as specialized as winter growing, and especially winter growing outside in the Pacific Northwest, how do you decide what varieties you're going to grow?
Well, I guess a lot of it's been trial and error. Of course, you look in the seed catalogs and kind of see what they might have to say about it, and then you ask other farmers what they've been growing and some experience of what I've grown in the past, and then just over the last it was like the first few probably 3 or 4 years we really did a lot of trials, and a lot of things failed, and we grew a little bit more than we needed, especially those first few years, just making sure that we could deliver enough produce to everybody. But in the last few years, we really honed it. So a lot of it's just been experience of different varieties that have done well. And, we used to cover a lot of stuff, a lot of our greens, like our tatsois and Echinus savoys and sorrel and other things like that. We used to cover a lot of that with row cover, like 1 ounce row cover. But then I found we were actually getting a lot of our radishes and turnips and things too. But we were getting a lot of disease pressure underneath some of that sometimes because there wasn't enough airflow and things were just wet. And so by accident, or by neglect, I guess I should say, some stuff, some of the row cover blew off and never covered it back up the rest of the season. It was probably just, I don't know if it was after one of the kids was born or what, or I just never really got around to it. And, we saw we're like, oh, well, this stuff did great. It got down to, 15 degrees, and here's this topsoy still looking great. Like, why cover it? Why do an extra step, and why cover it if we don't need to? So we've really gone to a lot of those greens, kind of those grazing greens that we harvest a lot kind of in February and March, just to leave those completely uncovered. We'll plant those usually around the first week of September or so. And they just kind of, they grow up to about size and just kind of hang out. And, between February, or I guess January and March, we're harvesting those. And that was really like a huge revelation, was to go, because when we started covering everything, we started covering our chicories with row cover. We covered a lot of things early on. And that was me just wanting to make sure that, well, obviously you don't want to lose all this hard work and these great, beautiful vegetables. You don't want to lose them due to the weather. But just with experience and talking to other people, we've really let go of trying to cover things all the time. Some things, if we have a big, obviously if we have a huge freeze coming, I'll run out and I have stuff on hand to cover stuff if we really need to. But usually things they might get hit, but then they'll bounce back in February and March, and so we usually, nothing ever really truly dies.
I don't know if that's true. Maybe not on your farm,
Well, like those chicories, the chicories, if they get hit really hard, they'll just look really slimy. But it's one of those amazing things about chicories is that they can get hit and kind of get slimed on the outside, but you peel off a few layers and you have this beautiful, you have a beautiful radicchio, or it's like this. Kind of like a treasure hunt. So, there's definitely more labor on that side of things, too, because of that, but you also still are able to freshly harvest chicories and have some amazing flavors, to share with everybody. So it's kind of special in that way.
And I suppose with something like the chicories, you talk about it being a little bit more labor when you leave them uncovered, but I suppose if you cover them and you get some foliar disease, you've got the same issues of it's leaves to pull off either way.
Yeah, yes, exactly. I just think if you can make do without having to cover everything and uncover it and watch the wind blow it or the deer step through it or, all those things, there's a lot just there. So the last couple of years leaving them uncovered have worked out fine.
Okay, so you said deer, and I'm curious about that because, again, in my experience, when we had even the garlic coming up in the spring, when it's that first green thing that's available, the deer were just on it like hippies on hummus, And how are you dealing with that on your farm?
Ooh, well, the last few years, we'll have like a couple deer that just kind of walk through. We don't have a ton of pressure. We're right on the edge of Ridgefield, which is a very fast-growing community. It used to just be like 1,000 folks, and now it's, I don't know, it's probably like 6 or 7. It's just, it keeps growing at a very rapid rate. They're putting in a lot of houses right now, about a half mile away from us. So the deer are definitely being pushed out in a way where they used to be. So that this last year was the most deer pressure that we've had in the last 7 years I've been here. And this year we're going to have to address that a little bit. In the past, what we've done is cover a lot of things with bird netting. Our first year here, I was going to build a fence on the cheap to try to keep the deer out of bird netting that I got from a blueberry grower out here, a big like 17-foot roll by, I don't know, 5,000 feet. And never got around to putting it up, so I just draped it on top of some of the crops, and it worked fine. So we've been doing that for the last, 5 or 6 years, and So that's worked really well. So we drape that bird netting on our carrots and our chicories. So we'll put that on there, and that keeps the deer, they don't like get entangled in there. They can't eat it, so they're not interested, and they just kind of walk away. And we used to drape a little bit of that on the edges of our brassicas to keep them out, but it seemed fine. But this last year, the deer, and it was a really harsh winter too, so they were pretty happy to have something to eat. So we definitely had some losses this year, more from deer than we have in past years. So that's something that I need to think about and figure out what we're going to do this coming season. If it's more of if it's getting a dog, if it's getting the sprinklers that spray deer when they walk by, if it's the coyote pee or wolf pee or whatever kind of everywhere, or I don't know what worked for you guys or didn't.
The thing that worked the best for us was this 3D electric fence from Premier Fence Supply. I don't know if they still sell it, but the idea was that you had two strands on the inside, so towards the vegetables, and one was at about 32 inches and the other one was at about 48 inches, I think. And then you had another strand, and that was maybe 2 feet on the outside, and that was placed about halfway between those two. And then then that was electrified, and we baited the fence, and that was the real key. And then we actually took that fence down in the wintertime because it was too difficult. Well, in the Midwest, where the ground freezes or when you get snow cover, it really messes with the conductivity of the ground. And so you couldn't close the loop on the electric fence in the wintertime. So we found that it was better to take it down and not have the deer be trained. You leave the posts up, but you just take those 3 wires down. And then the deer don't get trained to the idea that fence isn't hot. When it goes up, it's hot. And then, like I say, we baited it with Premier sells these great little bottle caps. It seems like a crazy thing to buy, but if you try to put them together, I'm sure it would take quite a bit of time. But it's a bottle cap with a piece of wire through it and then a cotton ball stuffed in it, and you wrap that onto the fence. And, nice little aluminum bottle cap. So again, very conductive. And then you put apple scent on the cotton balls, and that encourages the deer to come up with their nice wet little noses and make really good contact with the fence, because they stop because of the 3D aspect, because they look at it, they don't have good depth perception, and they go, oh, what's going on here? We're confused. And then they smell the apple scent, and then they get to the apples, and then wham. So, which when they've eaten enough of your radicchio is a pretty satisfying thing to have happen.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. Oh. Totally. You gotta keep them out. Yeah, I feel like I've seen some of those 3D fences around, and I think that was one thing we always thought about. But what we had was working. But I feel like we definitely need to address that this year, make a better plan like that.
So when you're draping that bird netting over the crops, because that's a really interesting approach to me. Are you just putting it directly on the crop, or is it going on hoops over the crop, or?
No, it's just getting draped on the crops.
Okay.
So it just kind of sits there, and we're not harvesting all the beds at once, so it's just it's easier than uncovering than the row cover, especially in wet row cover in the winter. Allows airflow, and also it's pretty lightweight, so. There can be some damage, though, to some of the crops. I mean, the carrot tops don't really matter because they're going to kind of freeze or get knocked back from just regular freezes no matter what. But there can be some damage on the tops of leaves, some of the chicories with a really hard freeze.
Right.
We could probably put some hoops up and do that. Haven't done that, so.
So with that, Danny, we're going to stop here, take a break, get a word from a couple of sponsors, and then we'll be right back with Danny Percich from Full Plate Farm in Ridgefield, Washington.
The Farmer to Farmer podcast is supported by Farmer's Web, software for your farm. Farmer's Web makes it easy to work with your buyers, saving you time, increasing efficiency, reducing mistakes, and streamlining order management from start to finish. What's not to like? No more lost order slips, no more lost invoices. Know which of your buyers have already paid, which have not. Keep records and download your financial data. Farmers Web helps you manage orders from buyers who've placed them online, but also those that order by phone, text, or email. Save time, reduce errors, and keep all your orders in one place. Automatically generate harvest and packing lists, generate product catalogs, generate packing slips. Farmers Web helps inform your buyers of delivery routes, pickup locations, lead times, and order minimums, while also helping you to keep track of buyer payment terms, special pricing, and customer information for all of your buyers. A flat monthly fee and flexible plan types allow you to pause, cancel, or switch plan types from month to month at any time, even during the off-season. FarmersWeb.com. The podcast is also brought to you by BCS America. BCS two-wheel tractors are often mistaken for just a rototiller, but they're truly a superior piece of farming equipment, engineered and built in Italy, where small farms are a way of life. BCS tractors are built to the standards of quality and durability expected of real agricultural equipment, the kind of dependability that every farm needs. I've had the good fortune to work with BCS tractors for over 25 years, and I wouldn't consider anything else for my small tractor needs. I'm not the only fan. More than 1.5 million people in 50 countries have discovered the advantages of owning Europe's most popular two-wheel tractor. And these really are small tractors with the kinds of features found on their four-wheeled cousins and a wide array of equipment. Power harrows, rotary plows, flail mowers, snow throwers, sickle bar mowers, chippers, log splitters, just about anything you could need for your farm. Check out bcsamerica.com to see photos and videos of BCS in action. And we're back with Danny Percich from Full Plate Farm in Ridgefield, Washington. It's about 30 minutes north of Portland, Oregon. So, Danny, before we went on break, we were talking about avoiding deer predation. Do you guys run into issues with field mice and other rodents in the wintertime?
We do. That's definitely, voles are kind of our big, or our small predator, I guess you could say. They love, what do they love? They can really like the chicories, the beets, and what else? Some other of the radishes, and not the turnips so much, or rutabagas. But those are definitely one of our pests, and we have built those Elliott Coleman style vole boxes that I think are in that Winter Harvest Handbook. There's some pictures of those. It's just probably like 8 by 8 by 6 inch box with a lid on top, and you put two mouse traps inside there. What's the name of the mouse trap? They're the gray ones where you don't have to touch them, and the squeeze kind of, they just open up.
Right.
So we have 2 of those in there, and as long as you're on top of checking those often, they work great. I've even found when I haven't gotten around to checking them that they end up making a home in there. They'll make a little nice house for a vole to live in. So that's worked really well. So it's just checking those often seem to work, but it's definitely a pressure and a huge bummer. Like when we had a lot of snow, we got about a foot of snow this year that hung around for a week or 2, and during that time, I definitely had some voles just tunnel all the way through, a couple rows of beets, and really, we definitely lost about one of our beet harvests that we were hoping to give out to the CSA. So we were one shy of what we were hoping to do, which really just sucks. So they're definitely one of our bigger pests. So I've really, I've always talked about when I should one of these years, we need to put up some more owl boxes and raptor poles and things like that to encourage a little more predation from the skies, and also doing the boxes. Now,
those boxes, are you baiting the traps inside?
No, the voles are just looking for a dark place to go. And so they just running in there. They're just kind of checking it out, and usually just run on in. And yeah, there's no bait involved. And those traps, I wish, a better mouse trap, that's the name of it. I think they're about $1 or $2 a piece. You can find them online and order, a lot of them. I think they will even give you a break if you order a ton of them. But those have worked really well. And you don't have to. You can bait them. One of our in-laws, if there's mice around up here, they'll rub salami on them. But that might be for for regular mice too. But I mean, I think my understanding is just, the voles are just looking for a place, a nice dark place, or a nice little quiet place to see what's in or go run into, and they just run in and run right into the trap. So it works pretty well in the field. And the great thing about those too is you can put them, they can be under row cover if you do have row cover. They can be under netting. You can kind of put those anywhere, and the traps aren't going to go off because they're inside a box. So they're great, and you just use any scrap wood you have laying around and throw them together.
Any tricks for positioning those particularly well, or do you just kind of set them out in the middle of your field and the voles wander along and find them?
Yeah, usually I just look, like I've just kind of see which crops the voles have been attracted to, or which in our case has been the beets and the chicories and what else? Sometimes we'll get into the carrots a little bit. So then I'm just putting them kind of just where I see them. Sometimes if I see like a little path they've started to make, I'll put them right in the middle of that and put it pretty flush to where they're running. It's always easier to put more on the ends of the rows or the ends of the beds, because that's where you're walking by, which is kind of nice. You can put them out there, and maybe see a lot of, it's just kind of where you see them, I guess. But, as you know, it's just easier when you're walking around your field, not having to go into the middle of the beds. And it's a lot easier just to open them up and grab them right there and empty them. So, yeah.
On 3 acres of winter vegetables, how many of these vole boxes do you have?
Ooh, I think we had about 20, and then we built about another 20 more, so we had about 40, I think. And I'd even put more out. I mean, I don't think you can really have too many, and they don't take too long to check, though I am guilty of not checking them often enough. In an ideal situation, you just, as part of a field walk, like once a day or every other day, you could probably spend like a half hour, checking and emptying them and resetting them. And that would totally be worth it. And I feel like that's one thing I could get so much better at, is actually, I'll set them and leave them there, but then I'll get distracted, do something else, and it's like, I should check those. And of course, there's some decomposing.
How often are you checking those? I mean, or maybe I should say, how often do you feel like you should be checking those?
I think you could check them every day or 2, or 3 days. I mean,
Wow.
Anything in that, and you're going to find, so they're there. They're out in the fields and running around. So, and they really can get, in the spring is when they can get even more active, because they're starting to, look for more food, or I think having some babies too, and all that. So, yeah, you can definitely, every couple days.
And when you're walking along checking those vole traps, are you carrying something to put the dead mice in, or are you just tossing them in the field roads?
I toss them on the edges of the field, on the borders usually, just back, either like back in the woods or back at the bottom of our field. We have a hill. We're on a south-facing slope, so down by an oak tree. So we just kind of toss them.
Right.
It's kind of been our approach, and let for them decompose down in the edges of things, or other animals, find them and eat them up.
All right. So you were talking about placing them on the field edges instead of down further in the rows, and I was having this vision of checking those fields in the wintertime and basically sinking up to your knees in mud. So tell me about harvesting in the wintertime, and I guess the challenges you got and the gear that you're using to do that.
Oh, yeah, sure. So one thing that we've done, one of the farms up here, Pumpkin Ridge Farm, up just outside of Portland. When I was on a tour there, they showed me their cabbage that they were growing, because they have a year-round CSA there, and I think they were growing dead on. And they had 2 weeks after they transplanted out their cabbage, they undersow those with crimson clover. And I was like, that's awesome. And it looked great, and so that's what I've been doing since then, and it's a great way to get some cover crop in between the rows, but also help with erosion control and, fix some nitrogen. But, I mean, one of the biggest benefits is actually having something green to walk on, so you're not, slogging through the mud as much, but you have a little something underfoot, which is a little more efficient and also helps with just the water. So that's been one thing that we've been doing in all the winter brassicas, is under 2 weeks after we transplant those out, is undersowing those, and that's been awesome. Sometimes definitely you can be a little rough on it, and you'll wear out some of the crimson clover, but usually in the spring it comes back and puts out a nice little flush of crimson clover. So we've been doing that, and that seemed to help a lot. And it is definitely, it definitely slows you down in certain areas where some areas can be a little muddier than other areas, and you just kind of, just try to stay on the. You step into the bed, you're going to sink, because it's a little, it's a loosened up soil. So if you can stay on the path, it's a little easier. But we're wearing muck boots. For boots, just about everybody that comes and helps harvest, we'll be wearing those. And then one thing some years ago, my wife got kind of as a joke, but as her own rain gear, was she got some insulated overalls, like some like fishing waders basically, but cut off the feet. And so it's like a neoprene fishing waders.
Right.
And they're like camouflage, and I made fun of her because they're pretty silly looking. But I tried them on one day, and I was like, these are amazing. You don't have a little swish, swish, swish of walk in a rain gear, which can, is slowing you down for one, because you're like, you have this resistance between your legs, and you're making that sound every time you walk. And they're insulated and more or less waterproof, too. So you can just wear those over some long johns and be warm and dry and walk a little easier also. So those have definitely been like one of my favorite things for harvesting in the winter. That, and then just any old rain jacket. I have like old Carhartt ones, which are great, that I've had for way too long, and the buttons don't really snap. I have like one button that kind of snaps and kind of holds it together. I'm probably due to get a new one. But if I just look at garage sales too, of something that looks like it's made of some real material that's not going to flake off. So I love to go to garage sales, take my kids to garage sales, and if we find some rain gear, we'll kind of stock up on it and use kind of whatever. But definitely the Carhartt and what is it, the Grundys?
Grundys, yeah, Grundys.
Yeah, those last a long time too. Any of those jackets, especially with the neoprene cuff, are amazing. And both the Carhartts and the Grundys both have that neoprene cuff, and that's so key for when you're washing vegetables or harvesting stuff and you lift your hands up at all, not to have water completely run down your arm. It's nice to have it, be a little bit restrained right there and not have the free flow of cold water down your arm in the winter. So, and then we'll layer up a lot. Sometimes we'll have 2 or 3 layers of, long underwear on, and that's fine by me. I'd rather have that than get cold. Just really layer up. That's kind of been the biggest thing, is just lots of layers. And, so if you're doing something stationary, like, say cleaning up the chicory, you're not really moving around too much in the field, that you're just, that you're warm. But definitely, so the neoprene boots, 1 or 2 pairs of socks, up to 3 layers, the long johns if it's really cold out. Lots of wool. Wool is definitely a big thing. And wool pants are great because, wool is insulative even when it's wet, and it's a little bit water resistant too. So I just get these like thick wool pants. You can even find, some of my friends will use like the old Army surplus wool pants that you can find. And those are great. Those are just great kind of in between. As long as it's not pouring, you're not having to kneel too much in the mud. I still will, even if it's muddy and wet, I'll still wear those. And that's just kind of nice because it's like an insulative layer. And wool's just great. I love wool. Can't get enough of it. So lots of wool. And then what else? I have a wool hat also with the ear flaps that flap down. I wear that a lot. I think it's like a Filson one that has the ear flaps, like the woolen ear flaps. That's fold down. It's really cold. Other stocking hats. And then we've gone to disposable, plastic gloves, like
just like those thin examination gloves.
Yeah, kind of like that, except for like the automotive kind that are a little sturdier, so they don't like rip every time you try to do anything. I ended up using some that my father-in-law had that he uses at his shop, and I'm like, oh, these are great. And you can get lots of uses out of them. You can wear them a bit. So we'll wear those, and then a lot of times if it's really cold or we're doing something colder, then we can put neoprene over that, neoprene gloves over that sometimes. Or sometimes there's, I can't think of the brand right now, but basically there's completely plastic gloves, just kind of like your regular garden gloves, but they're all plastic all the way around, so they're not breathable on top, like the cotton on top. There's some that are like that. There's some that will go up to your elbows. So there's lots of different kind of options. But when it's really cold, the neoprene with plastic underneath are huge. Just having that plastic underneath, that plastic auto glove or examination glove, having that underneath any glove is great because you're keeping the physical wet off your hand.
Right.
And just that in itself is amazing. Keeping your hands, just from being dry at least. And even that, those gloves also don't really breathe, so you're kind of trapping some heat in there, even though it's a really thin membrane. So that's been those have worked really well the last couple of years.
At the beginning of the show, you indicated that you are mostly working by yourself. You got one part-time helper for part of the year?
Yeah, yes, usually we have somebody that comes out and works 2 days a week pace, probably from May until September. And then October's usually off. And then this last year we had, how many days? I probably had 3 days hired out during the winter for harvest. And then we have some people that do work trades in the wintertime also. We'll have on a Monday, I'll have like a Monday of a harvest week, I'll have 2 paid people and 4 work trade people. They work for their vegetables, basically. They work for their share. And I've been super lucky to have people who have used to manage farms or have their own farm or worked on farms who live in Portland and do other work now but still want a farm. So I have people that are skilled and experienced and know what's up and how things work, and also don't mind bundling up and working. And so we've been really pretty lucky to have the people that either work or do the work trade on the farm to help with things.
And so with a fairly minimal or in the case of people doing work trades, maybe a somewhat inexperienced workforce, what kinds of equipment do you guys use to support you doing so much of your work alone?
Well, we have a G, so we have the Alzheimer's G for a lot of cultivation. So we'll use that as with tine weeders and sweeps. We have some hilling discs for the leeks. Try to dig trenches and then plant our leeks and then hill our leeks. Try to get nice long shanks that way. We have automatic irrigation in our greenhouses. We still walk through and check, but everything's on timers, and we adjust kind of accordingly to what the weather's going to be like that week or within a couple days. So if I go away for the weekend, things are still getting watered, and I can leave. And sometimes I'll do a little overwatering on the weekends just to ensure that things don't dry out. So that's been really helpful, having the automatic irrigation. What we recently motorized a root washer that we had. Josh Volk and I were hanging out, and like, Josh, can you help me build a root washer? I was like, sure. So we got some old bicycle rims and parts, and he built a prototype just with some cedar fencing and some bicycle rims and some casters, and we put all that together. And then I motorized that this last year, and that's been huge to actually have a root washer. You can set it and forget it to some extent, and then go around, wash some bins, do some other stuff, weigh some stuff, write some notes down on the whiteboard, and then get back to it and unload it and do the next batch of whatever roots. So that's definitely been a huge time saver in the winter. We have a couple garden carts, but we're on a hill. We've talked about, I don't know if this will ever happen, is getting like an electric assist like they have for bicycles these days for a garden cart. Maybe using like a wheelchair motor or something that's versatile, that can be outdoor in the elements, or kind of one of our next ideas to try to make. We also talked about putting up a winch at the top of the hill to pull carts up. It's it's a good workout, walking up a hill with a cart loaded down with muddy roots.
Yes.
It's huffing and puffing at the top no matter what. You can never really, you don't do it enough to, you do it often enough, but it's still a lot of work. So we usually have that's kind of one of our next things that we're going to try to, who knows what will happen this year or next, but something like that would be pretty great. I don't know, what else? I have a back we have a backpack sprayer for a lot of foliar feeding we do in the summer, every week or two. I also have a big tank that gets on. I have a second G that I can use for parts, and actually has a foliar tank or a tank on there that the previous used for foliar spraying, and I just need to change that over. I feel like that'd be a nice thing that would save a lot of time in the summertime, but I haven't got that up and going. And then we also, for irrigation, we use these wind fighter sprinkler heads on these little bases, like sprinkler bases, garden sprinkler bases, little sleds, I guess is what you could call them. And we'll drag those across from one field to the next. So we kind of have 3 fields in a row. So say we have our beds are about 175 feet, I guess. So we can drag that from one field across to the next and kind of water the next one fairly easily. So it's a pretty easy way, instead of moving hand lines and having to disconnect everything. You kind of leave these, it's like 3/4 inch poly in between each sled, with probably like an 18-inch riser, and then a Nelson wind fighter sprinkler head on top. And we'll drag those, or one person can drag those easily from one field to the next. And they're pretty lightweight, and I don't break them too much. Sometimes the sprinkler bases can break a little bit. They're not perfect, but it's made it definitely fairly easy for one person to move irrigation around and not, I've moved lots of hand lines, and that's fun, and it can be an Olympic sport of its own, jumping over beds with hand lines. But
yes, very much so.
It's been pretty easy, especially in our scale with the 3 acres, having to move those lines that way.
With the large amount of root crops that you're growing for your farm, are you doing anything special for tillage for those?
We use a chisel plow in the spring, and we'll usually do kind of rip down the hill. We would put, depending on when I get in and what the soil's like, it's either 2 or 3 shanks between 2 and 4 feet apart behind we have a 50 horsepower tractor, International, that we have. And we'll rip down the hill to try to increase some drainage that way. And sometimes we'll go crossways and kind of make like a checkerboard, just kind of, ripping that way down the field. But that's about it, and that's just kind of for all the plants, just to kind of promote some better drainage and water flow, for the whole farm.
And then in addition to the chisel plow, what are you following that with? Are you just using a rototiller for your secondary tillage?
Secondary tillage is a disc. And we didn't, right when we started, all we had was I think we just had like a mower. The first year we just had a mower and a tiller, and that was about it. And then chisel plow, we had the chisel plow, the mower, and the tiller. And then probably 2 or 3 years back, we finally got the disc. And that is, I love the disc. You can drive a lot faster. It's aggressive, but not too aggressive. So we usually do a couple passes with the disc, or depending on what we need to do next, or where we're at time-wise, or if we're in a time crunch or whatever, we can do one pass and let that sit a little while, and then get back to it in a few weeks, or do a couple passes to really break it up, and then the next week or two follow that with the tiller for kind of final bedding up. And we have, on the back of our tiller, I've welded 3 spots where I have rebar that I can, that can basically mark rows. So as we're tilling, we have this rebar that's basically welded to the back of the tiller that marks 3 rows, and you can take the rebar in or out if you just want to have 1 row or 2 row or 3 rows according. And that's been a really nice way just to not have to mark beds, but have straight lines, and especially for following it with the G, to have that spacing consistent. That's been great. And then we just eyeball when we're transplanting, which isn't perfect all the time, but it saves time. And usually I err on a little more room than less room for the crops, and I feel like it evens out. But that's definitely one area we might change at some point. But definitely having the marking the rows as we till has been a huge time saver, and worked with all our systems too, with the G and everything.
What are you using for a seeder for getting in crops like the carrots and the beet?
Oh, right right now I still have the Earthway, and last year I was going to buy the Jang. I saw you talk at the Small Farms Conference in Oregon, not this last spring, but the spring before, and I was like, I should buy the Jang. I just need to buy a Jang and just get good, consistent, spacing between turnips and rutabagas and other things, and I have gaps and things. And so maybe today, maybe after I talk to you, I'll go buy the Jang. So that's I've been telling the last few years I've talked myself into it, and then all of a sudden it's time to plant, to direct seed things. And I was like, oh, I forgot. I just got to get stuff in, and I don't buy them. And I just work with what I have. So what I've done, and it's worked, and it's worked reasonably well. Is I've put electrical tape on the plates of the Earthway, and I've kind of figured out ways to make the Earthway work, and just kind of modifying the plates. I remember when I talked to the guy at Sudden Egg, and they sell, lots of seeders there. But he said that they sell plates, that are actually custom, but that he said you can just basically super glue the holes. Once you find your right seeding rate, you can super glue the holes on the Earthway to kind of make custom seed plates for the Earthway.
Right.
And I never got around to it, so I just use electrical tape, and it works good enough to kind of cover up the holes. So we'll use that, and like the parsnips is definitely like my hardest one, because I think I probably just use the carrot plate. I think I do 3 to 4 passes on each row, depending on the size of the parsnip seed. And I get a pretty good stand, but it could be a little more. Definitely, that's like the biggest one that I feel like could really use some precision. So I'd like to get the Jang, get some pelletized parsnip seed, and just not fuss around with it as much,
Parsnip's hard no matter what you do.
And everything about it's a little bit finicky.
Are you doing any flame weeding?
I have in the past, and then the last few years I haven't. I used to with the beets and carrots, but I guess what I was saying earlier is the weed pressure that we have isn't that intense in the middle of July when we're doing those seedings. So I could probably do it, but I don't. Usually we end up doing one good one hoeing of the. We'll do like once the carrots are up, we'll hoe about one time, and then they'll be large enough. And the next time I'll use the G, and then use the G probably one more time, and then mate. But usually I don't ever really need to do any hand weeding with the carrots or the beets. Just I think it's like the timing that we're planting things. Everything's really wanting to grow, the carrots,
right.
And they usually just that one hoeing works really well to get things the first round of weeds, and then the G can do the next couple times, and then they're pretty much good to go.
For doing the winter harvest, are you succession cropping? I mean, do you put in multiple crops of carrots, or is it just one that matures at the right time in the fall and then just holds over the winter?
It's just one. Yeah, we've just done one. This year we might do 2 so we can harvest some a little bit earlier and then store those in the walk-in is what we were thinking. But usually it's right around mid-July is when we're planting most of our carrots for harvest in the fall. So we have lots of. I do a little succession with some of the grazing greens, and sometimes with parsnips I'll do it just to do some trial days, just have a couple different sizes. I can harvest some stuff a little bit more in the fall, and then some stuff will still be, will grow a little bit more in the late winter, I guess, or size that just won't be quite as large. So, but most everything's kind of a one-time date like that, so it's like a one-time shot. So, yeah, all those brassicas, about mid-July, we're transplanting all those. We've gone to direct seeding all our chicories is one thing we've done also, where we're direct seeding chicories, and I felt like we get a pretty good stand that way, and they seem like there's a lot less transplanting. And that number I still need to look at a little bit, but I feel like the direct seeded chicories also just do, I imagine they just have they're really settled in a little bit more than transplanting those guys out.
Have you found that it makes a difference for overwintering them?
I haven't, because I haven't done like a side-by-side necessarily. I know Josh has talked about that in the past, that he thought it might. I haven't. One of the farmers around here, Anthony Bittard of Ayers Creek Farm, that's how he does all his chicories, is usually that first week of July, I was talking or emailing with him or talking with him that he direct seeds all his chicories the first week of July, right around the first week of July. And so that's usually where I shoot, sometimes around there, sometimes a little bit earlier. And that usually seems to work pretty well. And it's also one really nice thing about seeding things, direct seeding things in June and July is out here the weather's usually not too hot, it's not too cold, things want to germinate, and you're not fighting the weeds necessarily, and all those small things that are germinating a little more slowly.
So tell me a little bit about your work schedule. If I understood right, you said that you're pretty much doing 4 days a week, 8 hours a day?
Yep. That's about right. Sometimes even less, because I'll have to take my daughter to school a couple days a week. So I won't start sometimes during the school year, at least till about 8:45 or 9. Wednesdays I always take my daughter to school, so I won't really start till 9. And then work. Usually have like a half-hour, 45-minute lunch. Sometimes, if it's just me working, sometimes I'll kind of do office work and eat at the same time. But if somebody else is working here, then we'll sit down for a half-hour, 45 minutes. Then cut out around 4 o'clock and start making dinner and hang with the family, and that's the rough of it.
That's pretty laid back for a vegetable farmer.
It's true. It's totally true. It's true. It's good. I mean, I think, there's not the same pressure to harvest stuff early in the morning as there would be if you were harvesting. And some days, I'll work later, or some nights I'll end up disking, or, something like that, depending on what's happening, But it definitely is a little more laid back, and it's definitely not working crazy hours all the time and not working until you burn yourself out. Or, I feel like we've definitely figured out a thing that really works well for our family. It's always been a number one, especially since we've had kids. Just a big priority is to not work too much, to make sure that we have enough time to enjoy each other and be around. And because sometimes my wife she'll end up working late, and so I'll have to get dinner going and get everything going. So I'll be in charge of things on that side. So.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thanks. It's I feel like we have a good rhythm going right now.
All right. With that, we're going to stop here, get a word from one more sponsor, and then we come back, we'll do our lightning round.
Sounds good.
This lightning round, and perennial support for pretty much every lightning round we've ever done, is brought to you by Vermont Compost Company, makers of Fort V and Fort Light potting mixes. When you're growing transplants, all of the investments that you've made in plant materials, heat, labor, and overhead depend utterly on the performance of the media where you expect your plants to grow. And if you're an organic grower, you're probably using a media based on compost, and you should be looking for the best compost. Most organic potting soils have two basic parts. It's the compost and then everything else. At Vermont Compost Company, Carl Hammer and his crew are very intentional about the inputs they use in their compost. While they're making use of waste products, waste disposal is not their primary goal. Ingredients are sourced consciously and with the end in mind. The same goes for the everything else part of the potting soil. Like the best in art, everything in Vermont compost potting soils has a purpose, whether it's the chips of ocean blue granite or the kelp that provides micronutrients, not to mention a little smell of the ocean. Fully composted compost, top quality ingredients, and a real sense for the art and the science of plant production combine with a real commitment to organic growing professionals to create a consistent product year after year. And in something that's subject to as many variables as market farming, it's nice to have something you can count on. VermontCompost.com. Danny, what's your favorite tool on the farm?
Ooh, the tractor might be one of my favorites. And the root washer, I'd probably say. When I was working with Josh at Slowhand Farm, we were digging all our beds by hand. And I was like, well, when I move out, I'm going to get a tractor. And it sure is nice. Tilling everything with the tractor, using the tractor. Saves a lot of time. And then the root washer has been a huge time saver. I mean, just, the ability to put the roots in there And in the wintertime, we're not dealing with tops or anything like, in the fall, I guess we have some carrot tops that we'll keep on, but the rest of the winter, the tops usually, the quality is not good enough to leave on for a lot of the roots. So being able to throw those in there and let them spin around for a while and do some other things, it just saves so much time and does a good job. And, so that's been a huge one.
What were you doing before you were using a root washer?
Spraying them down, flipping them around, just spraying them by hand and roughing them up, just as you've probably done, just on a table, spraying them. On our, we had a table I made just with a lath top, and just spraying them and putting them in bins.
It's hardcore.
Yes, it's definitely in the winter. It's also, it's wet and cold, and you're standing around spraying carrots, and it's not that fun. There are things other people would rather be doing other things than that. So.
And then, something that we didn't talk about earlier that I just want to touch on is you mentioned a couple times working for Josh at Slowhand Farm, but you've also spent some time working on other farms before you finally started your own in 2010, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Could you just tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yeah. Back in 2000, I worked at a farm in Wisconsin. My friend was out there working on a farm. He was willing to split his stipend with me. I think he was getting either $100 or $200 a month in room and board, and so I got half of that. And we worked from dusk till dawn and had a great time. And that was kind of, we milked goats and sold to farmers markets and helped run a CSA out there. And then I worked in Portland for a few, wanted to be closer to my family, and moved back here and worked on a couple different CSA farms, Savannah Organics and the 47th Avenue Farm, and definitely honed some skills there. And that was fantastic. Did that for a few years. Then I took a little break because I wanted to learn how to do some carpentry work or just building work. So I started working doing some residential remodeling. I started learning how to build things. And while we were doing that, I had a little half acre with a friend who ran some land and grew some garlic and sold some farmers markets, just to kind of keep our hands in the soil and the earth. So we did that for a little bit. Then I helped some friends build some houses, and eventually just kind of decided I wanted to get back into this. Is really where my heart was back growing vegetables, and I had learned some skills that I needed to learn, and we came back. Yeah. We were able to come out here to Michelle's land, which isn't like the best soil in the world, but we've been making it work, and plants have been growing, and people seem to like the vegetables we grow. So, yeah, it's been working out.
Awesome. What's your favorite crop to grow?
I love chicories because they're just they're beautiful first off, and then they have like this sweet and bitter, and then once the winter comes around, it kind of helps sweeten them up. So it's a really special crop that I don't think gets enough attention as it deserves. And one great thing about it too is you can't grow lettuce outdoors in the wintertime, and even in hoops and things, it still takes a lot of effort. But chicories are a really nice green to eat in the wintertime, but also has a whole another nutrient value than brassicas, so it's nice to switch it up from just a brassica heavy diet also. So it's nice to really have the chicories to kind of shape your diet that way too.
Is there a particular chicory that would stand out? I mean, if you were going to a desert island and could only take one chicory with you, which one would it be?
I love the sugarloaf and I love the Castelfrancos. Those are probably my two favorites. And it's a pretty close tie. They're both on the milder side. The sugarloaf, it's like a romaine almost, in its own way. It's like really crunchy and crispy, and it's one of the sweeter chicories out there. So it's really, you can do a lot with that. And the Castelfranco is just beautiful and a pretty thin-leafed chicory, and it's speckled, kind of green and red, and it's a beauty. So it's really delicious too.
Danny, what's your farmer superpower?
Superpower? Oh, I guess just rolling with everything. If it's going to be crazy weather, I guess it's the ability to not get too down, not get too up, not get too down. just kind of roll with what comes. I don't know if that's a superpower.
We'll take it. You know,
Okay.
rolling with the punches sounds like a superpower
Rolling
to
with
me.
the punches. There you go. Rolling with the punches.
And finally, if you could go back in time and tell your beginning farmer self one thing, what would it be?
Oh, I guess be a few things. I would say work with what you have. You know, don't just work with what's around you, and don't be afraid to ask for help. There's tons of people that know so much more stuff than you do, so don't be afraid to ask questions and ask for help. And I guess the other thing would be not to take everything too seriously. You know, like one thing, before I started farming, you know, there was, I did a lot more backpacking, and I did a lot more summer play, I guess, or had a lot more flexibility in the summer, right? That's like the blessing and the curse of farming, is you get to work outside every day, and you get to, you know, be outside, and it's amazing, and work with the soil and work with the plants, but you don't necessarily have the same flexibility of, say, taking off to backpack for a weekend or, you know, jump outside of things for a little bit. So I say to make sure you keep doing some of those things in the summertime that sometimes when you're doing farm work, it's hard to keep doing.
Awesome. Danny, thank you so much for being my guest today on the Farmer to Farmer podcast.
Oh, it's really been a pleasure, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
All right, so wrapping things up here, I'm going to say again, this is episode 122 of the Farmer to Farmer podcast, and that you can find the notes for this show at farmertofarmerpodcast.com by looking on the episodes page or just searching for Percich. That's Percich. The transcript for this episode is brought to you by Earth Tools, offering the most complete selection of walk-behind farming equipment and high-quality garden tools in North America, and by Rock Dust Local, the first company in North America specializing in local sourcing and delivery of the best rock dust and biochar for organic farming. Additional funding for transcripts for this episode was provided by North Central SARE, providing grants and education to advance innovations in sustainable agriculture. You can get the show notes for every Farmer to Farmer podcast in your inbox by signing up for my email newsletter at farmertofarmerpodcast.com. If you like the show, please head on over to iTunes, leave us a review, or you can do that in Stitcher or wherever else you can leave reviews for the show. You can also talk to us in the show notes, or you can tell your friends on Facebook. We're at Purple Pitchfork on Facebook. And hey, when you talk to our sponsors, please let them know how much you appreciate their support of a resource that you value. You can support the show by going to farmertofarmerpodcast.com/donate. I'm working to make the best farming podcast in the world, and you can help. Finally, please let me know who you would like to hear from on the show through the suggestions form at farmertofarmerpodcast.com, and I'll do my best to get them on the show. Thank you for listening. Be safe out there, and keep the tractor running.